Hello, I'm Burt Green. This is the Burt Locker MMA show, back for another week. Having a look this week at MVP, the Netflix fight card by Jake Paul featuring Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey in the main event. And also you had Francis Ngannou in there as well. I'll be having a look at that, recapping it, seeing if it was any good. Versus the UFC, we had Arnold Allen this week. Let's see how he got on. And also looking ahead to UFC 329 announced this week, as well as what's going on May 30th in the UFC. So let's start off with MVP. MVP, you had it, the whole thing it's designed to combat to be a rival to the UFC, but I don't think it is. It's never going to rival the UFC. I quite enjoyed the big nature of the event. It felt like a big event, but it didn't look like it. I mean, it was set up really well. The actual production values were surprisingly good. I was very, very impressed with the production values. However, I would say that arena looked pretty empty. I was considering it's a 5-fight card. Every single fight, you had 3 main events basically, and every fight was more or less a main event. There was hardly anybody there outside of when you got past the first riser, you could see a lot of empty seats, even in the main event. I think they may have struggled to sell tickets for it, and I don't think the tickets were too expensive from what I've heard on the internet. But you know, they say if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. So take that with a pinch of salt. How did it do on streaming numbers? Probably really well, honestly. You had some big name brand stars there. So you had, Nate Diaz, Mike Perry. They'll pull in your MMA fans for sure. Francis Ngannou, people are always intrigued by him, and he's got a bit of a name, from the boxing world as well. Gina Carano versus Ronda Rousey is what it is. It's two legends. Maybe they should have fought, 10 years ago, and it would have been relevant then, but less so now. And the entire fight card for me was just poor matchmaking up and down. And we'll start off with the first fight of the card, Robelis Despaigne, or Despain, or however you say it, the Cuban fella, Taekwondo. He's absolutely massive, ridiculous reach, elite level striking, Olympic level Taekwondo guy. But he got found out in the UFC by guys who were not particularly good grapplers, who just wrestle humped him. And he had nothing to defend against that. He's fighting Junior Dos Santos. Now, greatest of respect to Junior Dos Santos, he was always a striker. He's just come out of bare knuckle boxing. So the chances of him actually shooting for a takedown are slim to none. Slim to none. The chances of fuel prices going down this year are probably better than Junior Dos Santos shooting a takedown in a fight at this stage of his career. So this was a perfect fight for Robelis. And he did really well. He knocked Junior Dos Santos out. It was a nasty knockout. It looked great. But let's take it for what it is. It's a guy in his prime fighting an aging warrior who's there for the payday, who is going to fight exactly to your strengths. And your strengths are going to be, better than his. And that's what happened in that fight. Calling out Francis Ngannou afterwards, I don't think. Honestly, I think Francis will just do what he did to Cyril Gane, and just he'll throw you down to the floor and he'll ground and pound you until you're dead. He would do it to he did the same to that PFL guy. I forget what his name was, but Francis has got some really good ground and pound, and actually his wrestling, as we've seen, is actually okay. And with the greatest of respect, some of the guys that Robelis was fighting, if they were able to take him down at will and just dominate him, then Francis certainly can. I didn't see the next fight on the card, but I then skipped straight to Francis Ngannou versus Philip Lins. Again, terrible matchmaking, because there was no real jeopardy there at all, because Philip Lins was never there to win that fight. He was there to be showcase another knockout on the highlight reel of Francis Ngannou, so the MVP could throw shade at the UFC by just calling him the lineal heavyweight champion over and over again, which I did note, and I thought, yeah, that's a great way of trolling the UFC. He's the former UFC heavyweight champion. Yes, he wasn't beaten, but he did leave, and yeah, you can call him the lineal MMA heavyweight champion, but unless he's fighting guys that are actually championship level, I just don't see it has any credence, any value, because Philip Lins, with the greatest of respect, is not a title challenger for a made-up lineal MMA belt or any other title for that matter. He's a decent fighter and he is tough, and I don't like disrespecting it, but he's not at that level, and he's wasn't at that level at light heavyweight, and he's not a big guy. He's not for heavyweight anyway. Stick him in there against the hardest hitting heavyweight in the history of MMA, and there's only one thing that's going to happen, and it's a Francis Ngannou knockout, which is exactly what we got in round one. In fact, I think the first three fights were all over in round one. It's not like the crowd would have gotten any value for money if there was a crowd there, because there really wasn't much of a crowd there. But yeah, it was poor matchmaking. They need to improve the matchmaking. Put on fights that will actually be competitive. The only fight that they got correct matchmaking wise was not Nick Diaz. No, we wish it was Nick Diaz. Nate Diaz against Mike Perry. That was a scrap, but it was always going to go one way. Mike Perry was always going to hit Nate Diaz at will. And no, Nate Diaz was giving a half decent account of himself, but he's got so much scar tissue. He's going to get blood pouring out of him, and they stop it between rounds. And that's often going to be the case when Nate Diaz is fighting a striker who is they're both tough, and it was a fun matchup. But let's not pretend either of them are near the top of their weight classes in MMA. They're just not. They're not there anymore. Mike Perry is astounding in bare knuckle boxing. I love bare knuckle boxing for Mike Perry because it seems like that's what he was made for. Now, I feel like he is a bare knuckle heavyweight. He's a bare knuckle champion in every sense of the word. I don't think he's necessarily an MMA champion, because I think if you put him against anybody in the top 10 of welterweight in the UFC, he's going to get completely exposed. And I feel like pretending any different is just, you're putting your blinkers on, aren't you? You're putting your UFC hater blinkers on, and you're saying that MVP is the future of MMA, and it just isn't. Because then you move on to the main event, and talking about the crowd, what crowd there was there not getting any value for money. Over in 17 seconds, armbar, we all knew it was going to happen. Gina Carano has not stepped into an octagon or hexagon for 17 years, and you're putting her against Ronda Rousey, who, yes, has been retired for a little while now, but she's not as far removed from the sport or from active competition. She's been in the WWE, and she stayed fit, and yeah, that was always going to happen, and it wasn't. That wasn't fun to watch. That was just like, well, that's that done. That's the event over. And so, honestly, the matchmaking for me absolutely ruined that event. The production values were really good. I'd say, look, one of the best things about that event was Jake Paul's seating area. Did you see that? Absolutely brilliant. He knows how to make a seating area for himself. Two massive, kind of lazy boy recliners, a widescreen TV in his booth to watch the fights on, and it's right in front of the cage. Tell you what, that dude knows how to spend money. I respect the hell out of that. If I had Jake Paul money, I'm an MMA fan, I'd probably put on my own event as well. Cherry pick some fighters that I would like to see fight, and have my own kind of little area like I'm Caesar. I just thought it was. I'm actually a fan of that. I think it was very, very good. Look, I'd have given anything to be sat there. That must have been brilliant. But I think he was the only one that was really enjoying the show. Look, was it a spectacle? Yes. Was it competitive? No. Is it going to be competitive for the UFC? Also, no. Not unless they get the matchmaking sorted out. So during that night, they did announce UFC 329. It's going to be the return of Conor McGregor. He's going to be fighting Max Holloway at welterweight. Why at welterweight? Why Max Holloway's like at most a lightweight. Conor McGregor doesn't. He's never looked good at welterweight. Why are they doing it at welterweight? That doesn't make any sense to me. Do it at lightweight. Conor needs to have some weight cut. Like Conor's always looked his best at lightweight. I don't like it. I like that fight. I like that rematch. I don't like it 12th of July at welterweight. I think that's stupid. Paddy Pimblett against Benoit Saint Denis. Love that matchup. I don't know who takes that, honestly. That's a really, really solid matchup. Corey Sandhagen, Mara Batista, fantastic. Brandon Royval against Lorna Kavanagh. That's a good fight. Gable Stevenson makes his debut in the UFC against Elisha Ellison. Not really heard much of him. I'm sure Gable Stevenson, the gold medal Olympic wrestler, will tear through him like wet toilet tissue. So that's what I think of that card as a kind of knee-jerk reaction. Is that will it be great to see Conor McGregor back? Yes. Will it be great to see him back at welterweight? I don't know about that. I think he's always looked pretty poor at welterweight, and I think at welterweight, Max Holloway's not a welterweight either. What does ballooning up to welterweight do for Max Holloway? What does that do for his speed, for his boxing? I don't think it's good for either of them. Just cut that extra weight, get down to lightweight, and do the fight there. I don't see. Conor McGregor's always looked a little lackadaisical at welterweight, and Max Holloway. Well, I don't think I've ever seen him at welterweight from what I can recall, unless he's taken a short notice fight at welterweight previously. I don't know. Please let me know in the comments how wrong I am. How many times Max Holloway has fought at welterweight? I don't recall a single instance. So I think he potentially will look terrible there. But either way, by the by, Conor McGregor's coming back, and I am here for it. We also had Arnold Allen at the weekend. Looked absolutely phenomenal in the main event against Melquizael Costa. Costa was a dangerous guy, honestly. He was throwing a lot of kicks, but Arnold Allen, he kind of reminded people who the hell he is. He landed his left hand over and over again. His ground and pound was brutal. He really he had to be minding his P's and Q's on the ground with Costa, especially because he was threatening with submissions and sweeps, and Allen managed to kind of to prevent him from doing anything really, and then shut him down in the stand-up. Costa landed quite a lot of kicks, but Allen was just able to close the distance, keep to his strategy, and he's just one of the best, kind of most complete fighters in that featherweight division. Featherweight really is a murderer's row at the moment. I don't know who you put him against next, but whoever it is, I think he wants the rematch against Evloev, which I would quite like to see, honestly. So congratulations, Arnold Allen. You looked really, really good there. And also Modestas Bukauskas looked pretty good against a short notice opponent change, Christian Edwards. It's never easy because Christian Edwards is coming in short notice. He's got nothing to lose. He's also a vastly different opponent to Rodolfo Vieira, who was the initial opponent, I believe, or it might have been someone else. But either way, Modestas passed that challenge, looked really good. And then coming up on May 30th, you've got Song Yadong against Davison Figueiredo. That's going to be a really fun one. That's at bantamweight. They're going to hit the hell out of each other, I would have thought. Alonzo Menafield is also appearing on that card. The one that I like is at heavyweight, Sergey Pavlovich against Taliesin Tejera. That's a really, really solid fight. You've got Muslim Salikov against Jake Matthews as well. That's going to be an excellent fight. I will be looking into that in much more detail in due course. But so I think that's about everything that's happened in MMA this weekend. I didn't actually put any bets on it, but I will be putting some bets on the main card for the UFC fight night in China. Is it in China? No, it's in Macau. Yeah, Macau in China. Yeah. So until next time, keep the odds on and the bets terrible.